Good evening, everyone. Mark Meckler here for the Sunday Night BattleCry. I'm your host, of course, Mark Meckler, and you can tell I am feeling defiant tonight. You can get this t-shirt, by the way. I love this new t-shirt. So cool. Convention Estates t-shirt. You go to shopconventionestates.com. You can get the t-shirt there, and you should get the t-shirt there, and you should be feeling defiant too. I don't know if you guys follow me on Instagram or anywhere like that, but if you do, if you follow me at Mark Meckler, one of the things you saw is that I was traveling this weekend. And I traveled out to South Carolina. I spoke at a Republican Party convention in Charleston. I was keynote speaker there. On my way there, on the way back, and this is my habit in airports now, no mask. Yes, I understand. There's a federal mask mandate. King Biden issued the mandate, right? I don't believe he has the legal authority to do that. And besides which, I don't really care. And the reason I don't care is because it's not science. It's fantasy, it's virtue signaling, it's insanity. I don't know if you saw it, but the president met with Prime Minister Abe from Japan, and they socially distanced, and he wore 2 masks. He's vaccinated. He's vaccinated. The stupidity of this policy, of this virtue signaling, beyond the fact it's not necessary, it doesn't matter, and it's stupid, it's dangerous policy. These guys say they want everybody to get vaccinated, right? I think that's every individual's choice. But this is what they say their policy is that you should get the vaccine. Why? Because then you'll have to socially distance and mask. Does that make any sense to you or to anybody? In other words, get the vaccine because you'll be no safer and you have to still isolate yourself and still wear face diapers. That makes no sense to me. I'm not doing it, right? I'm not doing it. I haven't gotten the vaccine. I don't really plan on getting the vaccine. I'm not in a vulnerable population. I feel good. I'm healthy. I'm relatively young. I'm not getting the vaccine. And when I travel and I'm traveling through the airports, I'm blown away that people, I was struggling to say the word, people are sheeple. They're sheeple. They just follow it. They just do it. Why? Oh, because somebody said they have to. No, you actually don't have to. And when you go through the airports, and I've now done this many times in many different airports, nobody says a word to you if you're not wearing a mask. Now, when you go to get on the plane, they're going to make you put on a mask. And I do because I have to. And I don't want to be a jerk. And frankly, in the airport, if I went into a store or something and somebody asked me or demanded I put on a mask, I'm not going to give them a hard time. I'm going to be polite. I'm going to be nice. I'm going to put on the mask. I'll take it off as soon as I leave. I might even take it off halfway through the store if they leave me alone. But I'm not just going to do it because they tell me. Why? Here's why. I don't operate out of fear. Fear is not a virtue. Facts and faith are virtues. If you listen to the facts, if you judge the facts for yourself, if you have a little faith in God or a lot of faith in God, then that's a virtue. Operating out of fear, not a virtue. That makes you a sheep. We need sheep dogs, not sheep. Don't just follow along because they tell you to. Be defiant. If you want to state it out loud like I do, shopconventionestates.com, you can buy this shirt. And there's another shirt you need to buy too, which is the Hell No Joe shirt. You guys saw me wearing it last week. I've been wearing it all over the country. Hell No Joe. It's got an AR on it. Why do you need to wear that? Because Biden is coming for your guns. He is. He's not kidding. He got asked about it at his press conference this week. And in his usual gibberish, he said, nobody needs a clip with more than 10 rounds. Who calls it a clip? I mean, there are guns that use clips, very rare, not hardly any. They're called magazines, Joe. I understand coming to the modern era, like right beyond the muzzle loaders. I think he was raised when there were only muzzle loaders. They're not called clips. They're called magazines, buddy. And why do you need more than 10 rounds? Because the bad guys have more than 10 rounds. And if you're target shooting and you're having fun, you need more than 10. And frankly, is it a matter of need? Really? Isn't it my right to keep and bear arms and that you shall not infringe on that right? Yeah, that's the way it works, Joe. And when he says no amendment is absolute, the Bill of Rights aren't absolute. I don't understand that. They are absolute, Joe. They really are. Now, I know you and your friends from the KKK didn't think that maybe the 13th, 14th amendments were absolute. Maybe, I don't know. You were friends with a bunch of racist people. You come from the party of racists. Maybe you don't believe the Bill of Rights are absolute. I believe the Bill of Rights are absolute. So I don't know what's wrong with you. He is coming for your guns. And he got asked by somebody in the leftist media. Notice nobody on the right is allowed to ask him questions. He got asked by somebody in the leftist media, not even a question really. He got led by somebody in the leftist media from AP who said, Joe, we love you. We love gun control. We want to push gun control. How come you're not pushing gun control harder? You got to do it harder. You got to make it your main thing, man. And Joe got a little annoyed. He's like, hey, I can do more than one thing at once. I am going to take your ARs away. I am going to take any magazines with more than 10 rounds away. He's coming for your guns, right? Anybody who tells you he's not is lying. And the Democrats lie a lot about this. They say they're not coming for your guns. They say those words, we're not coming for your guns. Yeah, they are coming for your guns. So get your Defiant t-shirt, shop conventionestates.com, get your Hell No t-shirt, and watch out for old Uncle Joe. Because, yeah, he's sly like a fox, and he's got a lot of people around him that want to come for your guns. They're going to try and take them away. They're not going to take away our guns. We're not letting them take away our guns. And by the way, don't count on your Republican politicians to protect you. We ourselves have to fight to protect the Second Amendment. It's what we have to do. It's why it drives me so crazy. People say, oh, Convention of States is going to put the Second Amendment in danger. What, are y'all a bunch of dummies? Seriously, what's putting the Second Amendment in danger are Democrats, not the people, not the 5 million Convention of States activists. The Democrats are putting the Second Amendment in danger, and we have to stand up against that. You know, Biden, in the same press conference, he dealt with something else which drives me insane, which is the JCPOA, right? So this is the Iranian deal, as Trump called it, the worst deal in history, gave the mullahs hundreds of millions of dollars, right, in cash, of course, because that's what you do. You deliver unmarked bills to people who sponsor terrorism all over the world. That's what you do if you're President Obama. That's what you want to continue to do if you're President Biden. And he is trying to revive this deal. By the way, President Trump, by revoking that deal, he put Iran on the rocks. He put them in the position where the mullahs were broke, where their economy was crashing. This is what you do to your enemies. See, this is common sense. It's not politics. It's not complex. You don't have to be a political science major. You don't have to be an international relations major. You just have to be a regular Joe like me. And you know what you want to do to your enemies is crush them, is to disempower them, is to take away their money, is to take away their power, is to take away their status, is to prevent their economy from working, is to prevent them from exporting terrorism. And Joe and his cronies, their attitude is, oh, if we're just nice to the Iranians, then they'll be nice to us. That's all it takes, right? That's what he thinks. And so now they're trying to revive this deal. The funniest thing is, in his press conference, he called it the JPOCA or something. Like, he got it wrong. He can't even get the names right. He's not all there, folks. The president has dementia. Who's running the policy? Look at what's going on with the Iran deal. Who's reviving it? These are people that surrounded President Obama, that crafted this deal, that are pro-Iranian and anti-Israel. And this is the most important part to me. Israel, the only democracy in the Middle East. Israel, the only place where Arabs have the right to vote in the Middle East. Israel, the only place where Arabs have freedom in the Middle East. Israel, the only place where gays are not discriminated against in the Middle East. In fact, as I understand it, the biggest gay pride parade in the world takes place in Tel Aviv. Yeah, and so what happens to that gay pride parade if it gets moved to Iran? Oh yeah, they get killed. Or Jordan, or Saudi Arabia, or anywhere else in the Middle East. So what we're going to do is we're going to elevate the most radical Islamic regime on the planet there in Iran. We're going to give them money. We're going to give them more power. We're going to revive their economy so they can go after Israel. Is that the point? Look, the Saudis don't support this. The Jordanians don't support this. United Arab Emirates don't support this, right? They don't support it. They're making peace treaties with Israel because they understand that the common enemy are the Iranians. Why doesn't the Biden administration understand this? It's honestly not complicated. There's something seriously wrong with these people. And we're to the point in American politics, and I've said this before and I'll say it again. I'm not referring to Democrats broadly. I'm not referring to people I know out there that are good-hearted Democrats, good value people. I'm referring to those in power. We've come to the point where it's good versus evil. It is evil to take the side of Iran against Israel. That's evil. It is evil to leave the border open, to leave small children open to the predation of the coyotes, of the traffickers, of the rapists, 30% of women being sexually assaulted and raped on the way up. That's evil. It's evil to put $14 million a day in the hands of the traffickers, of the cartels. That's evil. That's what the left is doing. The leftists in power today. They're intentionally tearing this country apart. There's another way that they're tearing this country apart that is unbelievable to me. If you've ever studied at all the history of communism, and you probably didn't do it if you've been through public school like I was, you had to do it on your own. But if you've studied the history of communism, you might have studied communist China, which is actually, by the way, the most threatening regime on the face of the earth right now to the Americans. Again, Biden cozying up to them, going hard after the Russians, who aren't much of a threat, really, but cozying up to the Chinese. The CCP comes out of the Chinese Revolution, right? And then there's the Cultural Revolution that takes place under Mao during this time period. Millions killed, literally. And the Maoist revolution has come to America. And some people will hear me say that, oh my gosh, Mark, hyperbole, you're over the top. I'm not over the top. The Maoist revolution, the Cultural Revolution, the purging of people who don't think like you do, the shaming of people who don't think like you do, the struggle sessions where people are forced to humble themselves and get on their knees and apologize, those have come to Georgetown Law. This is supposedly one of the preeminent law schools in America. My good friend, Randy Barnett, teaches at Georgetown Law. I think the greatest libertarian law professor in the United States of America, and just a great guy, teaches there. And what's going on there is a tragedy. Now, I don't normally do this, but I'm going to read some stuff to you. I don't normally read to you when I'm on there. I just kind of riff and talk to you guys, but there's something that you need to hear. And this is written by a law professor at Georgetown Law. And by the way, she is a leftist law professor. Her name is Lama Abu Odeh, and she wrote about Georgetown's Cultural Revolution. If that sounds familiar, you can, by the way, you can find this article at Quillette. That's Quillette. So that's Quillette.com. And this was published on the 9th. It's called Georgetown's Cultural Revolution. Sandra Sellers, an adjunct professor at Georgetown University's Law Center, was forced to resign because she was caught on video saying to her colleague and co-teacher, David Batson, I hate to say this, I ended up having, this angst every semester that a lot of my lower ones are blacks. It happens almost every semester. And it's like, oh, come on, I've got some really good ones, but there's usually some that are just plain at the bottom. And it drives me crazy. Of course, there are good ones, but come on. Batson appeared in the video nodding embarrassedly. This video is a class recording that's only accessible to students in the class, and it's password protected. The conversation took place after the students had logged out, and the professors, unaware that the recording in the class ran for 10 minutes after the end of class time, thought they were having a private conversation. There's a student who isn't enrolled in the class, posted the video on Twitter, and it instantly got thousands of retweets. You know what the dean did? In response, he acted by referring the culprit professors to the university's Equity and Diversity Committee. That's a Maoist organization. Why? To investigate them. Then the Black Law Student Association issued a statement declaring what was said was racist and demanding that the professor be fired. Sellers has to be fired, right? He terminated Professor Sellers' contract, and Batson was placed on administrative leave pending an investigation by the Diversity Committee, which will also investigate whether the professor's alleged bias affected the grades they gave their students. Batson resigned. The dean described the conversation between he and Sellers as abhorrent. What was interesting was what ensued afterwards. The black faculty at Georgetown issues a statement denouncing what Sellers says. They describe it as grounded in white supremacist thought. These are leftist professors. They're liberals. But the Black Law Students Association argued that Sellers' comments amounted to a stereotype about black students that inevitably had a negative effect on their performance and called for revising all grades awarded by her. The statement insisted her comments weren't unique, as the legacy of white supremacy is insidious, and called on professors who operate from unspoken white supremacist notions to examine their own flawed thought patterns and correct them. And then it gets worse, because it's not enough, right? So then a black law professor calls for non-black faculty to issue a statement, not necessarily in support of the letter already written, but from the position of their privilege within racialized spaces like the classroom, and wondered in what numbers should such a letter be supported and with what reservations. So quickly, what do you think happens? On cue, there's a statement by the non-black faculty drafted in which the signatories, quote, acknowledged their responsibility as non-black faculty members to engage in the constant work of examining and revising their own flawed premises. They also, quote, acknowledge the many levels at which they must confront the ongoing white supremacist notions underlying the ideas of merit that may contaminate assessment and performance. That sentiment was repeated 4 times in the statement, each time drafted slightly differently, but making the same point. Close to every member of Georgetown Law's non-Black faculty and others signed the letter. Now, remember, this is being written by a female leftist professor. She says, I and a few others withheld our signatures. In the face of the overwhelming support by the non-Black faculty, 2 white professors of the boomer generation with a lot of progressive credentials pushed back. One agreed with the general framing of the incident as described in the statement by the Black faculty, but worried about the precedent of firing a professor for expressing her views to a colleague in what she had good reason to think was a private conversation, especially because the firing was in violation of Georgetown's policies on secondary use of videos. So in other words, she's saying, I agree, but we ought to be cautious here. This was followed by another email in which this professor expressed exasperation at the twin statements on the grounds they handed the political right an easy target from the culture war perspective and suggested a more earnest effort was needed to address the question of poor performance by the minorities at Georgetown. If they were performing badly, then surely the faculty needed to figure out ways to better serve them. So he called for putting aside the narrow conception of merit, which underpinned the poor evaluation of some students. Look, I just want you to hear what I just said. Put aside the concept of merit, which caused some students, in other words, it's so hard for me to even just deal with this. What he called for is, we're not going to do merit anymore. We need to put that aside. We're not going to grade on merit. Other professors who pushed back complained the 2 statements relied overmuch on the notion of unconscious bias, which presupposed the problem is linked to the shortcomings of particular individuals, when in fact, structural racism is to blame. Okay, I'm going to stop here. I'll read a little bit more. This is insanity. All right, this is undeniably, this is it. This is the cultural revolution at Georgetown. It's absolutely incredible. And these people who pushed back, they were progressives who pushed back, radical progressives. Nobody said anything about their pushback. Nobody stood up to support them. Not one person said, maybe we should have a discussion about this. Maybe we're going over the top. And this is what the professor who's writing this says. And she's concerned, and she's right. She says, the silence to my mind is telling. It speaks of the lack of resources within progressive thinking that could be drawn upon to resist the trend that has bedeviled American academia over the past few years. The academy is a different place today than it was only a year ago, and it was different a year ago than it was 5 years before. Terror and dread fill academic workers, professors, and staff alike, and it's everywhere. Neither the call for distinguishing between unconscious bias and structural racism, nor for dismantling merit so that minorities succeed, seem able to do the work that the authors of these emails want them to do. All right, they fail to deliver responses of the kind, let's talk about this. Maybe the problem's overdetermined. Maybe it's not reducible to unconscious bias. What they beget instead is a combination of dread and virtuous self-congratulation. These 2 sentiments, dread married to virtue, constitute, to my mind, the effective embodiment of progressive ideology prevalent among white liberals as developed in its most privileged space, academia. They're typical. They're 2 faces of the same coin. Flip and you see dread, flip again and you see virtue. Can you imagine living in that environment? Of course you can, because we all live in that environment today. That's what the radical left has created in America, an environment where people are just terrified, paranoid, living in dread. Will I say the wrong thing, tweet the wrong thing, act the wrong way, wear the wrong thing, laugh at the wrong joke? Constant fear. I might lose my job. I might lose my standing. I might be ostracized in my church. Dread, constant sense of dread. And the flip side, if I say the right thing, if I wear the right shirt, if I put the face diaper on, virtue signaling. So I feel so virtuous. I feel so good about myself. This is outrageous. This is absolutely outrageous that this is going on in America today. And I'm going to continue reading now. Progressive liberals are blind to the fact there's a regime takeover everywhere apace in academic institutions. A new ruling elite is taking over academic institutions by using minority status to exercise a quote-unquote soft coup, and it's appealing to minoritarianism of progressive ideology to legitimize its coup, or if you like, to manufacture consent. She calls the adherents of this ideology the progressoriate. The reason that challenging this aspect of dominant ideology is taboo because it leaves you vulnerable to the charge you're uncomfortable with the project of empowering minorities. Not just the transfers of power from traditional elites to historically disadvantaged groups that's already begun to take place in the academy, but further transfers of power. And apparently, she says the only acceptable response when confronted by any aspect of the ideology that has facilitated the coup is to enthusiastically endorse it, to celebrate it. And if you're not a minority, anything less risks being interpreted as dread at the prospect of your own imminent loss of status, or if you are, as evidence that your soul has been colonized by white supremacists. I mean, this is insanity. This is a progressive saying that. As I said, virtue, the other side of dread. The position of the progressoriate in relation to the coup is akin to that of communist activists in relation to a communist takeover. She says the unfolding history of the new coup is being written every day across the domain of academic institutions in the US as the progressoriate watch muffled, hesitant, objecting in private. And then when someone makes their reservations public, they find themselves at risk of being suspended or losing their jobs. The new elite has at its disposal an arsenal of tools to perpetuate its rule. It not only postures as representative of others in the way the communists did, but the intelligentsia representing the worker or the peasant in the latter's case and representing the victims groups in the former. The new elite can also represent itself as victims, which is an opportunity even the communists would have balked at. Members of the new elite have no hesitation at weaponizing their feelings, silencing opponents by claiming they've offended them. And of course, such claims are readily accepted by the progressoriate because of their acceptance that minorities are necessarily oppressed. I mean, and this is just, and it goes on and on and on and on. If it echoes a Maoist takeover, that's because it is. It passes the sniff test. Look, this is a leftist saying the Maoists, people with Maoist kind of ideology, people who intend to purge people who don't think like them, are taking over. Polls show that young academics are pumped up more on moral steroids than intellectual ones. Why stop when you're winning? Right? This situation is in flux and it opens the door for moral entrepreneurs to up the ante. Some enterprising students at Georgetown Law complained to Slate magazine the dean allowed the Federalist Society to host an event on multiracial working class by 3 white men. Is that unbelievable? That's an objectionable thing now. Moral entrepreneurship means that what it is to be racist is being redefined daily with someone's demise. It's an ongoing post-fact articulation of the definition of bias. And why not declare conservatism racist while you're at it? I mean, they have they don't even have any self-awareness. They are taking over our institutions. It's absolutely unbelievable. I'm gonna finish with her finishing paragraph. Remember, she is a progressive and she is sounding the bell. She says, when I protested to the faculty diversity trainer, a law professor from the West Coast, that the real minority at Georgetown Law are the conservative students who've been telling me about how isolated and beleaguered they feel, especially with the flood of emails from the administration when Trump was in office denouncing racism, without defining what it is or indeed giving a single account of a racist incident, she quipped, well, then they don't have to be at Georgetown. They can go to Notre Dame. Lama Abu Odeh is a law professor at Georgetown. She is a self-identified progressive, and she is sounding the alarm. And I need you to understand, this is taking place in our most elite institutions. The people who are coming out of these institutions are going to lead law firms. They're going to be senators. They're going to lead our companies. And this is what they're bringing. The Maoist struggle session is coming to an institution near you. It probably is already at your company, at your school. You need to be aware and you need to fight back and you need to stand up and you need to say no. At what cost? In my opinion, at any cost. The cost of your job, the cost of your stature, the cost of your standing. If we don't stand against this stuff, we will lose this fight and we will lose our country. We are on the way to being a communist country. Sounds crazy, but we are. This is the kind of stuff going on. It'll be a slightly different ideology than we've seen in the past. It'll be the wokest ideology, but the totalitarians are in charge of our institutions. They're in charge of Congress too, and they're talking about court packing, right? I've heard a lot of people say that court packing isn't going to happen, can't happen, won't happen, and they might be right. And I pray that they're right. But here's the problem. What seems like radical, wild, out there, fringe leftist ideology this week, next week is mainstream on the left. Next month, next year, it becomes mainstream. And they are trying to destroy the institution of the United States Supreme Court. And they say we have the constitutional right to do it. And they do indeed have that right. The problem is the Supreme Court is still the most respected political institution in America. It's considered the most independent. It's not. It's been politicized. We all know that. but it's better than the others. And they are trying to make it just baldly political. They're going the route of Venezuela. Venezuela, Hugo Chavez packed their Supreme Court. That way the Supreme Court would just do whatever their Congress wanted them to do. And that's the route the Democrats want. This is what is going on in America, and you need to be defiant. You need to say, hell no, Joe. You need to stand against this stuff. This is what we have to do. I read that essay to you, big chunks of it, not the whole thing, but I read it to you because it represents what's going on in all of America right now. If you don't stand, if I don't stand, if we don't stand, we're going to lose this country. You know, hopefully most of you flip over as soon as this is over to Rick Green on his back porch, hanging out by the fire, doing his Sunday night back porch with Rick Green. It's fantastic. He will tell you the same thing. He and I, we're like brothers in this fight. And I hope you stand with us like brothers in the fight. Let me quickly tell you the state of COS. We'll do a couple of questions. We'll get out of here. State of COS, I'm going to, I was in South Carolina this weekend. I was in South Carolina last week. We had committee victories. We're moving forward in both the House and Senate and committees this coming week. Looks good in South Carolina. I'm going to North Carolina this week on Tuesday between 10 and noon, the North Carolina Capitol in Raleigh. I'll be there. We'll be having a rally in Raleigh on the green in between the legislature and the legislative office building. We'll see you there between 10 and noon. Come with us if you can be there. If you're in North Carolina anywhere, make the drive 10 to noon in the square, the big grass square between the main legislative building and the legislature, legislative office building and the legislature. I'll see you there in Raleigh, 10 to noon. All right, real quickly, I want to run a new ad for the store. I want you to see some of the cool stuff we have. Producer G, let it roll, please.
Enough prayers. Time for some action.
And President Joe Biden has the will and the courage to act.
No amendment to the Constitution is absolute. We should also ban assault weapons and high-capacity magazines. Everything that's being proposed today is totally consistent with the Second Amendment. We're going to get these passed. This is just the start.
All good, red-blooded Americans. Joe Biden wants to take our guns away. What do we say? Hell no, Joe. Got to get one. That's where you get this defiant shirt too, but the hell no, Joe. That's the one right now. We got to say hell no, Joe. All right, let's go to Q&A real quick before we close it out. Let's see. Jill Jones says, I held my first meet and greet as a COS district captain, and it was a great group of passionate, Constitution-loving patriots. Love sharing about the Convention of States. The Grassroots Army is a resurrected sleeping giant. Jill, God bless you. This is what you need to do. Go to conventionofstates.com, sign the petition, click the Take Action tab, do what Jill did, become a district captain. What you'll find is a lot of patriots just like you who love their country, want to be in the fight. They'll be there for you. They'll be there with you. They'll be your new family, and we'll all be defiant together. All right, Sarah Bush Ganschow says, what can I do? Well, same thing. Sign up for Convention of States. Go to conventionofstates.com, click the Take Action tab. Garrett, let's see. Kara Jower says, what should Americans do if their state and country won't become a sanctuary for the Second Amendment? Push your legislature, push your governor. Governor Pete Ricketts in Nebraska just declared sanctuary status for Nebraska. Second Amendment sanctuary. That means they won't spend any state resources to do things that are anti-Second Amendment. I love that. Mark White says, what sort of pushback can we mount against betrayals like we saw in West Virginia? Mark, I'm still a little bit breathless about what happened in West Virginia. I really don't understand. Seems to me we got betrayed by the speaker in the most brutal way. I haven't spoken to him yet. I'm honestly, what I'm doing is trying to pray and trying to not react right now. And we will have a plan. And yeah, we'll bring the heat in West Virginia next session. I guarantee it. And we won't, there's no way. I mean, we won't trust the speaker. Absolutely not. Let's see. Linda St. John says, how many states have signed up for COS? It takes 34 states. So far, we have 15 states that have signed up. I'm hopeful that South Carolina becomes the 16th here pretty quickly. Sherry Yeager says, how can we stop this runaway administration? Look, here's what you got to do. You got to be involved. The Convention of States Army is an army about more than just calling it a Convention of States. Our buttons read at the bottom, it's more than a convention. It's about you getting involved, getting to know your state legislatures, making your legislature strong, conservative places where they will push back against this kind of madness. It's about calling a Convention of States. By the way, it's about you, Sherry. It's about you running for school board. you running for city council, you running for state legislature. I mean, people in COS are always looking for new people to support. And sometimes people are always looking the other way. You got to look at yourself. We all have to be involved. We have to be activists, hardcore activists involved in the fight. That's the only way to save this country. If you haven't done it yet, go to conventionofstates.com, sign the petition, click the Take Action tab, become a district captain. That's the one that's most important. Also go to shopconventionofstates.com, shopconventionofstates.com. Get your Hell No Joe shirt, get your Defiant shirt, get your COS Rally shirt. I want to see you out in the field in your gear. And of course, after you leave this Facebook Live tonight, go and check out Rick Green and watch his back porch or front porch, whatever porch he's on. It's a nice porch. Go watch him on the porch. Listen to what Rick has to say. Smart man. He's my brother from another mother. Until next week, God bless y'all.